tell me about the shows that you're presenting.
So there are three performances, three different productions. One of them is called Outwitting the Devil, which is a group work. It's, initially well, actually all the way through, it was inspired and by what's happening in the world today. But I always want to usually connect it with a myth that I can use as a kind of a groundwork from which to then plant the present situation. And that groundwork was proposed to me by Ruth Little, my dramaturg, and it was one of the oldest myths known to humankind, the story of Gilgamesh. And so really this, in the most simplistic way, Gilgamesh represents all the majority of the politicians that we experience today, the very patriarchal dictator, power hungry, sense of controlling the mass, not giving voice to the mass. But what's specific about Gilgamesh in this particular narrative is their relationship to nature. And it was really a conversation with my daughter, who's 8. At the time, I think she was 6 or a bit younger, and we were talking about climate change and how the world is changing. And so Gilgamesh, really, the story of Gilgamesh is really about his relationship to nature, and his viewpoint of nature is that we own the earth, we own everything. Mankind, not humankind, mankind owns the earth. Mankind owns nature. And what's really interesting for me is that even though Gilgamesh is from a patriarchal system, the exact opposite is nature for me, which is very maternal. It nourishes, it feeds, it guides. It's there's something sacred and spiritual about that. About nature and earth, and so in a sense, the story, even though it's been taken from Gilgamesh, it's really about what we're experiencing today, our relationship to nature and how disconnected we are. And at some point, nature got disconnected from storytelling. If you look at old myths, they were very connected to nature. I mean, what's interesting is the story of Gilgamesh is a lesson for us to learn from, because what happens is Gilgamesh destroys a part of nature, and then nature takes its revenge. The gods take its revenge and takes away Gilgamesh's most loved possession. And in a sense, now looking during what we're living, the world that we're living in, can you imagine an invisible virus has brought humankind to its nature, to its knees? Mm-hmm. And our sense of denial and our sense of amnesia or dementia, we have global dementia. We're almost acting like nothing's happened and we're going back to some sort of normality, rather than going, what can we learn from this? What is nature telling us? But we don't relate to nature in that way. We don't have a conversation with nature. We don't listen to nature. We've lost the art of listening. And I think that's common in all three of my productions. The second one being Zenos, which is a solo performed by myself, which I give light. The collaborators and I give light to the forgotten soldiers, and they are the colonial soldiers who fought in the First World War. So it was really triggered by me getting really upset, all of us getting really frustrated and shocked that we didn't know, some of us didn't know that I didn't know in my history, when I studied history, that Indian colonial soldiers, African colonial soldiers fought in the First World War. It was not told to me. So it's about giving voice. Carnival of Shadows, that's what it's about. It's about giving the ones in the shadows and putting them in the forefront and saying, we are here to listen. Let me be the body or bodies that tell your story. And Chota Zenos is directed by this wonderful director called Sue Buckmaster, and it's inspired by Zenos, but it's for children, and it's its own show actually. Even if it's inspired by Zenos, Sue Buckmaster has made her own show. It's its own story, and it's very. It was very challenging, of course, because Zenos, the themes are foreigner, stranger, war, death, but we wanted to make it. Sue and I felt it was important that this could be translated to children, because they should also know the other side, the other perspective. We have to start young now, because too often the stories that I had studied, and my generation and generation before me, were stories predominantly in the West, were predominantly from a white male perspective. So how do we rechange that? So Carnival of Shadows is celebrating the voices that were not heard or seen.
Thank you. You said you weren't taught about the role of colonial soldiers in school. When did you learn about it then?
In 2018.
That's quite late, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a few years ago. I mean, we started looking at, because articles were coming out, because it was the centenary of 100 years. So between 2014 and 2018 was the celebration. I don't know why we call it a celebration. That's a bit bizarre for me, but it was perhaps to remember. Let's put it that way. So what are we remembering? So for me, it was not a remembering, it was a discovery, because articles were coming out by people of color, writers of color, journalists of color, who had done their homework and realized, and so in the article, it talks about colonial soldiers. And so that's when we discovered it, really.
You must have done research around this. And what did your homework tell you about the role of colonial soldiers then? What did you learn?
How terrifying it was. It was interesting because there was a kind of a duty, a pride to fight for the British Empire. The village will respect me if I go to war. So there was this kind of romantic, euphoric responsibility and energy in many cases, also from young British English soldiers. Like they were going to be with their friends. It was the First World War. Nobody had experienced a world war. So there was something romantic about going with the boys and going to war, but we're going to hang out together, sing together, not realizing the horrors that come with war. And to give more twist to that and more trauma, you've got these colonial soldiers who are fighting a battle that they don't feel necessarily, not always feel a part of, that were in a foreign land with foreign smells, foreign tastes, foreign food, foreign people. They were the foreigners. They were the strangers. They were Xenos. So I don't know, I call England my home, but it wasn't their home. And yet they were going to give their life for something that was not their home. So, it must have been extremely traumatic, I presume.
So it's Remembrance Day later this month. Do you think there's enough awareness today about the role that South Asians played?
I don't think it's about, is there enough awareness? I think it's about, are you willing to listen? I think racism exists everywhere. But there's so many of us that deny it. Even in my own culture, it's not a pandemic of just white people. There's racism and there's bias, inherent biases in all cultures. So it's whether we choose to acknowledge it. It's the listener that is who has dementia, chosen dementia. They choose to have dementia.
That must leave you quite frustrated, isn't it?
I think so. I feel so. Nobody's listening to Greta Thunberg. especially the people in power. Yet she's the only one fighting for the truth with the young generation. It's their future. And it should not be held to ransom by any person in power right now.
Dance speaks a universal language. Would you say that its potential to unite communities has been underutilized?
I think, no, I think there is a real effort. I think dance is being embraced in many cultures, in many areas, many societies. It's not easy because science and technology and other subjects are always at the forefront, at the top of the list. There's a hierarchy. Art seems to be a kind of almost regarded as an entertainment. It is entertainment too, but it's also a lesson. It's life lesson. For me, the most important science is in your body. And we still don't understand the body. We still don't understand the mind, which is in the body. So I think it can be given more reverence, more respect. But it's not the role of the artist. I think it's very important for me to say, it's not the role of the artist to be able to change political policies. We can't do that. We can collectively maybe fight for it. Mm-hmm. But not enough of us isn't fighting or speaking up. That's the worrying bit. And the funny thing is, we live on one earth. There is no moon. It doesn't matter what Bezos says. It doesn't matter what none of those men say. But we live on one planet. In the end, this is our home. And the earth will continue without us. We seem to be the cancer.
You pick stories from Asian mythology, as well as tales from all over the world, as well as contemporary stories. I have 3 questions related to that. What is it in a story that appeals to you?
There has to be, first of all, what's important is whose lens are we hearing the story from? That's completely crucial. Before the story is, whose lens are we experiencing this narrative from? Is it the victors or is it the ones, the victims? I think what appeals to me usually are stories that are unheard, untold. I think stories appeal to me or connect with me if I feel there is a deep sense of learning from that narrative. That's the purpose of a myth. That's the purpose of all stories that became religious. It's not about you being literal. Don't take it literally. It's a metaphor. It's there to learn from, to not make those mistakes. That's what it's there for. We misunderstand. So many of us misunderstand religion and assume that it's telling you exactly what to do. No, it's much deeper than that. It's not a practice. It's a belief. Belief is something that is like air, it's water, it's alive. It's not in a book.
What stories do you find more challenging, real life ones or mythology? As an artist?
Right now, no, I've always been connected to mythology. So I find it very exciting and I feel very much more connected than present day stories. However, we're in a bit of a myth gap. The old myths haven't died yet and the new myths haven't been born yet. We haven't written them yet because we're moving so quickly that we have, by the time we write the myth of today, tomorrow's myth is completely different. So we're in a bit of a myth gap. So it's hard to know what the myth is today. And what is it to be human? I think that's something I'm always kind of looking for. And I think it's harder for me in my position. No, it's harder for me now than it was before because I'm kind of going a little bit to the threshold of being a little bit bolder, of putting a mirror up to society and perhaps critics, and yeah, just I live in England. It's very complex. It's very complex. Who judges my work? I feel sad that there's not enough Indian or people of color that come to see my work. It's really extraordinary. It's about Indian soldiers. You'll have some young generation, but that's the joke of it all, that you don't have Indian communities. It's the majority is white, I have to say, but there is a mix of different cultures, different people of color that do come, but it's usually the young generation. It's interesting. Not my parents' generation. Yet it's the story of my parents' generation and their grandparents.
How does
Zenos
that
and Choto Zenos. Huh?
How does that make you feel?
Well, I was angry for a long time when I was young, because I was not accepted within my own community. Not my community, the Asian community. It was the Caucasian people who embraced me. But what's interesting, I think, is I was very clear from the beginning that I don't want to make work that caters towards their perspective or towards an imperial lens. And perhaps that's why I get some of the reason, not all the reason, but sometimes I get real tension from critics and people, because I'm not pampering to making work that is colonial in some way. I want to make work because I believe in it and it's rooted deeply in me. And I've always tried to stick to that, really. I've always stuck to that. And some people, embrace it and some people will not. My work is, I want to move people. I want to try and make work that belongs to everyone, that everyone can relate to it without compromising craft.
Okay. Why is it, you mentioned racism is there in every community and every sector. Why is it you think that Asian stories are not picked up by other mainstream dancers or dance production companies?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think I could guess that who are your audience? That's what you have to ask. That's what we pick, right? We pick the work that or whoever the majority of the audience is. We cater it towards them, right? And predominantly, as I said, Asian people don't come to my show. So I can't blame anybody, really. I can't blame the other cultures. My own culture people don't, they come, but it's artists, who would come. It's not why, yeah. And I understand it's intimidating sometimes because perhaps it's not a venue that they're used to, or that, I don't know. It could be, it's so many reasons. It's dangerous for me to generalize. It's very specific to each person, really, why they would not come, why they're not curious or support. I don't know. It's different to everybody.
Would you say there's enough talent in the pipeline for another Akram Khan in the next few years?
I hope not. I really hope not. I think there's a lot of talent that will not be another Akram Khan, that will be its own entity. Mm-hmm. I think the young generation, there's a huge amount of talent. I worry that we think about our goal is different, I think, the new generation. There is a real sense of wanting to get it very quickly. And what is that thing you want to get? What is success? Fuck it. It wasn't about, I loved dancing. That's it. I love telling stories through my body. You put me on a street, I'll do it on a street. You don't pay me, you don't pay me. That's how I was when I was younger. I just wanted to learn and I wanted to dance. And I just needed a space to dance in, that's all, It's so different now. It's about, social media. How do I get my name seen? I think if your work speaks, even in the corner of an alleyway, and there's few witnesses, that word will spread. Of course, there's luck. There's people, the right people at the right time might see you and put you on a main stage. But what's really interesting with technology is it can spread like wildfire if there's something special happening, you know? And I think there's so much talent, but nobody has the patience to listen anymore to knowledge. We want to listen to information, and information is just data. We're more impressed by data, by the way, this modern civilization, rather than knowledge. Knowledge is data that has been embodied, that has been experienced. It's an experiential information. So we don't listen to our grandparents' stories. We're too much concerned with the future, and not enough. If you want to know how to move forward, you have to look at your past. One is connected to the other. The past is not behind you. It is in front of you, because you can see it. You can see everything that's happened. The future is behind you because you cannot see it.
As you grow older, is your body cooperating with you, so to speak?
No,
How
it
do you
shouts
deal
at
with
me a
it?
lot. Huh?
How do you deal with it?
Oh, I have to sweeten it a lot. I have to negotiate with it. I have to massage it. It's such a diva, my body now. It says, oh, no, I don't want to do this movement. Oh, I don't want to do that movement. Nope, this is too, it's just like constantly complaining. So no, it used to be silent. When before 30, it's always silent. It's because you choose not to listen to it or give it voice. There's no negotiation. It's a bit like the problem with Gilgamesh. You feel you own your body, so you can abuse it the way you want. Body is part of nature too. It's an energy, right? It's a life force. And our bodies are also living museums. I love museums, don't get me wrong, but they're man-made. And the arrogance of us modern civilization that thinks we can put an experience into a museum. Our own bodies are living museums.
I watched your documentary, Curry House Kid. You spoke about your experiences growing up in London's East End. You have mixed
No, I didn't grow up in East End. I grew up in South London, but
your dad had it
in Wimbledon.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Wimbledon. So it was South. But the thing is, my mother taught in Camden, and a lot of the kids were from East London. So she taught Bengali. So we used to go down to Brick Lane every weekend to buy, food, grocery and stuff, fish, and particular vegetables and stuff. So yeah, we're connected in that way, but we didn't ever live there.
Okay. You spoke about your experience of racism while you were working in your dad's curry house. You have mixed race kids right now, yourself now. What is their experience of bias?
I don't know. They're very young, 6 and 8. We could not be in a worse time right now. Really worry for them. I'm, presenting Zenos, which is triggered by First World War, and Choto Zenos. And it's just weird that, the symptoms before, when we were researching Ruth Little, all of us, the systems that were the patterns that were happening before the First World War are the same systems that happened just before the Second World War. And there are the same systems, realignment. It's like a chess game. And the same systems are happening right now. What does that really say? Where the right wing, where hatred is exploited.
So in a previous recent interview, you spoke about not enough diversity being in arts organizations, in the boardrooms. How does that make you feel?
Who are the gatekeepers? That's what I want to say. That's the first thing you look at. And is that I have to be careful of diversity because that's made by white people, that word. So a colonial word. It's an imperial word that's been designed for them to feel accepted, that they are accepting of others. Yes, the board has to have people of color because they're the gatekeepers.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
and all
you.
the very best with your shows.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
you.
Take care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.